Most people quit right before it starts working. Not because they picked the wrong investment, not because they aren't disciplined, but because nothing seems to be happening. For months, sometimes years, and when progress feels invisible, it's easy to assume you've made a mistake. But there's a pattern that shows up in almost every wealth building journey. The beginning feels painfully slow, then one day it doesn't. Let me explain. Imagine someone named Daniel. Daniel wasn't trying to get rich. He wasn't chasing financial freedom or looking for the next hot stock. He simply wanted to stop living paycheck to paycheck. At 26 years old, he earned enough to cover his bills, but never enough to feel like he was getting ahead. Every month looked exactly the same. Money came in, money went out, nothing changed. Then one evening, Daniel learned about investing. The concept sounded simple. Invest a small amount every month. Buy a low-cost index fund. Keep doing it. And wait. That last part bothered him. Wait, for how long? 10 years? 20 years? 30 years? The numbers looked amazing on paper, but Daniel wasn't thinking about 30 years from now. He was thinking about next month. Still, he decided to start. He automated $50 a month into an index fund. Not 500, not 1,000, just $50. And that's when he entered what I call the boredom stage. This is where most people quit. Every month, Daniel contributed money. Every month, he checked his account, and every month, it looked almost exactly the same. Maybe it was up a little. Maybe it was down a little. Sometimes it was actually lower than before. He expected momentum. Instead, he got silence. His friends were taking vacations, buying new gadgets, upgrading their cars. Meanwhile, Daniel was putting money into something that barely seemed alive. 6 months passed. Nothing exciting happened. A year passed. Still, nothing exciting happened. And this is where most people misunderstand compounding. The early years are not designed to impress you. They're designed to test you because the market isn't rewarding your money yet. It's rewarding your consistency. Most people fail this test. They look at their account balance and think, this isn't working. Then they stop. But Daniel kept going. 2 years later, something changed. Not in his account, in him. He entered the identity stage. At first, investing felt optional. Now it felt automatic. He stopped asking himself whether he should invest this month. The decision had already been made. Every paycheck automatically sent money into his investment account before he had the chance to spend it. The money no longer felt available. It felt untouchable, like seeds planted for the future. And that's a powerful shift, because wealth is often built long before it appears. The person changes before the numbers do. Daniel wasn't rich, but he had become someone who invested. When the market dropped, he kept investing. When scary headlines appeared, he kept investing. When everyone else was chasing trends, he kept investing. Not because he was fearless, because it had become part of who he was. Then years 3, 4, and 5 arrived, and something interesting started happening. Daniel entered the separation stage. For the first time, his money started growing without his direct effort. He would log into his account and notice gains he didn't personally create, not from working overtime, not from a side hustle, not from selling anything. His money was beginning to work on its own. At first, the gains were small. Then they became noticeable. Then they became meaningful. One month, his investments earned enough to cover a nice dinner. Another month, enough to pay a utility bill. Eventually, enough to match one of his monthly contributions. That's when Daniel realized something important. He was no longer building wealth alone. Every dollar he had invested in the past was now helping him. His old contributions were generating new growth. And every year, that effect became stronger. Think of it like hiring employees. At first, you're doing all the work, but slowly your team grows. And one day, your team starts accomplishing more than you can by yourself. That's what compounding really is. Tiny financial employees working for you around the clock. But the biggest surprise was still ahead, because the real magic of compounding happens much later than people expect. Daniel continued investing. Year 6, year 7, year 8. Nothing dramatic, just consistency. Then one day he looked at his annual statement. He noticed something that completely changed the way he viewed investing. That year, he had contributed around $3,000, but his investments had earned even more than that. For the first time, the growth from his portfolio was larger than the amount he personally added. Think about that for a moment. The investments were now doing more work than he was. This is what I call the handoff stage, the stage where the engine becomes larger than the fuel you're adding. For years, Daniel had been pushing the snowball uphill. Now the snowball was beginning to roll on its own. And here's the part almost nobody realizes. Most of the visible growth in a long-term investment journey happens near the end, not the beginning. The graph stays frustratingly flat for years. Then suddenly it starts bending upward. The curve becomes steeper. The growth becomes noticeable. And that's why so many people miss out, because they quit during the flat part. Imagine two investors. Both start at the same time. Both contribute consistently. One quits after 3 years because progress feels too slow. The other continues for 30 years. The difference isn't intelligence. The difference isn't luck. The difference is endurance. One person stayed long enough for the curve to bend. The other left before the magic showed up. And that's why time matters so much. Not because it's exciting, because it's invisible. Most people underestimate what 10 years can do, and they completely underestimate what 20 or 30 years can do. Eventually, Daniel stopped checking his account every week. Then he stopped checking it every month because he finally understood something. The goal wasn't to watch the money grow. The goal was to give it time to grow. Today, if you ask Daniel what changed his financial life, he won't talk about finding the perfect stock. He won't talk about timing the market. He won't talk about some secret strategy. He'll tell you it was consistency, automation, patience, and refusing to quit during the boring years, because that's what always happens before the income snowballs. Nothing. Then something. And that something is usually much bigger than people expected. Not because they're smarter, not because they're luckier, but because they stayed in the game long enough. So if you're currently looking at your account and wondering whether it's working, if progress feels slow, if the numbers seem too small to matter, you might be exactly where you're supposed to be. The question isn't whether compounding works. The question is whether you'll stay long enough to see it. Because the snowball always looks smallest right before it starts rolling downhill.